So I want you to imagine, just for a second, that you are sitting at a heavy, solid wooden table.
Like a big oak dining table.
Yeah, exactly. The kind that has been in a family for generations, right? You reach out, you knock your knuckles against the surface.
And you hear that dull, satisfying thud.
Right. You feel the resistance against your skin. It is undeniably perfectly solid.
It feels very real.
It is there, it is real, and, it is going to stay there whether you are looking at it or not. I mean, that is just basic common sense.
Absolute.
We basically navigate our entire lives based on the absolute certainty of that physical resistance. But if we follow the breadcrumbs left by our sources today, that basic, undeniable common sense is, well, it is a spectacular fabrication.
It really is. And, we are biologically wired to trust that thud. I mean, our evolutionary survival totally depended on understanding macro-level physics.
Right, like knowing that a rock is hard.
Exactly. Knowing a rock is hard, knowing a pyre has teeth. But when we actually look at the underlying architecture of that wood, that trust completely shatters.
Because if you take a microscope to that table, you see the wood fibers.
Yeah.
And then you zoom in further into the cellular structure, and you get to the molecules, the carbon and oxygen atoms.
And we already know the classical model of the atom is outdated. So if we bypass that entirely and look at the actual quantum fields, the solidity simply vanishes.
It just disappears.
It does. You are left with these vast, unimaginable expanses of empty space, populated only by fluctuations of energy.
So the solid table is basically a ghost.
Basically, yes. The deeper you look into reality, the more reality itself seems to dissolve.
Yeah.
And this profound disruption of everything we think we know about existence is the foundation of what we are exploring today.
Which brings us to today's topic. Today we are taking a deep dive into an incredible stack of sources.
A really massive stack.
Yeah, we are looking at comparative analyses, detailed philosophical texts, and the specific, highly technical writings of physicists, like Fritjof Capra and his book, The Tao of Physics.
And historical heavyweights like Niels Bohr.
Right. And we are also pulling from some really intricate dialogues between Western scientists and spiritual leaders, specifically referencing the Dalai Lama and his book, The Universe in a Single Atom.
Which is such a fascinating read because he is so well versed in the science itself.
He really is. Plus, we have this massive, just a dense 30-paragraph exploration of the very fabric of reality to get through.
It is a lot to cover. But the mission of this deep dive is to map out an extraordinary convergence.
Okay, lay it out for us.
We are going to explore how two disciplines that honestly could not seem more different on the surface.
Right. The ancient introspective spiritual practice of Buddhism on one hand,
and the highly mathematical, empirical science of quantum physics on the other. We are going to see how they are actually describing the exact same underlying mechanics of the universe.
They are looking at the same phenomenon from completely different ends of the telescope.
Exactly. They're climbing the exact same mountain from two different sides.
And for you listening, this is not just going to be some abstract academic thought experiment.
No, not at all.
This challenges how you perceive your own identity. It forces a complete reevaluation of your connection to every single person and object in the world around you.
It essentially asks you to reconsider the boundaries of where you end and the universe begins.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if the solid wooden table is not actually solid, if we are zooming all the way down into the subatomic level and finding just empty space and vibrating fields, what are we actually looking at?
Well, let's start with the physics side. We know matter isn't made of tiny billiard balls.
Right. Any audience familiar with basic quantum mechanics knows the Schrödinger equation doesn't describe hard spheres, it describes wave functions.
Precisely. Particles like electrons exist as probability amplitudes.
Which means they are ranges of potential rather than fixed objects.
Yes, they are probability clouds.
But, the part of the source text that really caught my attention wasn't the probability clouds themselves, but the space between them.
Ah, right, the vacuum.
Yeah. We usually think of a vacuum as a void of absolute nothingness, just empty space. But quantum mechanics reveals the quantum vacuum, which sounds like an oxymoron.
It does. And the term vacuum is really just a historical leftover that doesn't accurately describe the math anymore.
So what is it actually?
The quantum vacuum is a space absolutely bursting with immense unimaginable energy. We are talking about zero-point energy.
Okay, so it is not empty.
Not even close. It is a dynamic, frothing field where virtual particles are constantly popping into existence. They borrow energy from the void, and then they annihilate each other fractions of a microsecond later.
Wait, they just pop in and out of existence?
Yes, and we can actually measure this. It is called the Casimir effect.
How does that work?
Well, if you take two uncharged plates and place them mere nanometers apart in a vacuum, they will actually be pushed together by the pressure of these virtual particles bubbling around them.
Oh, wow. So the void actually has weight.
It has weight and it has force.
So if I am looking at reality through this quantum lens, the analogy that comes to my mind is a digital photograph.
Okay, I like that.
Imagine looking at a high-resolution photo on your phone, right? From an arm's length away, it looks like a solid, continuous image of a landscape.
Right, you see mountains, trees.
Yeah, but if you pinch and zoom in far enough, the solid image breaks apart into thousands of individual pixels.
And if you zoom past the pixels,
Exactly. If you could zoom past the pixels, you would just see the underlying architecture. Lines of code, voltage states, electrical currents turning tiny LEDs on and off.
that is a great way to visualize it.
That the solid image was just an illusion created by a massive collection of flickering energy viewed from a limited perspective. That is our wooden table.
It is. And what is truly remarkable is that over 2,000 years before the Casimir effect was measured, or the Schrödinger equation was formulated,
Yeah.
Buddhist philosophy arrived at this exact same structural conclusion about reality. They called it Sunyata, which is usually translated into English as emptiness.
The text specifically warns us about that translation, though, because, the word emptiness in English carries a lot of baggage.
It does. It implies a void, like a depressing, hollow room with nothing in it.
Right. But in the Buddhist context, heavily elaborated by the 2nd century philosopher Nagarjuna, Sunyata absolutely does not mean that nothing exists.
Exactly. It means that everything is void of a permanent, independent, unchanging core. This is the absolute bedrock of anatta, or non-self.
Okay, so when Buddhism says a table or a human being is empty, it means they only exist temporarily.
Yes. They exist as a constantly shifting convergence of causes and conditions. There is no permanent essence of a table hiding inside the wood.
There is a beautiful Mahayana Buddhist maxim from the Heart Sutra quoted in our sources that says, "Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form."
And that maps flawlessly onto the concept of the quantum vacuum.
How so?
The emptiness of the quantum vacuum is the very thing bursting with the zero-point energy to create the form of virtual particles. Form and emptiness are not opposites.
They are the same thing.
They are the exact same phenomenon, just expressing differently in a given microsecond. The probability cloud is the form, and the underlying energetic potential is the emptiness.
Okay, I am going to act as the grounded voice for the listener here for a second.
Go for it.
Because while the math of zero-point energy is elegant, my daily experience is very, very different.
Naturally.
If everything, including my own body and that wooden table, is fundamentally just empty space, vibrating quantum fields, and temporary probability clouds,
Yes.
why does stubbing my toe on that table hurt so unbelievably much?
That is the ultimate question, isn't it?
Right. How can a manifestation of Sunyata, completely devoid of a solid core, result in a fractured toe?
Well, the illusion of solidity is incredibly convincing, and the pain is a very real biological signal. But the physical impact isn't caused by two solid structural objects crashing into each other.
It isn't.
No, it is the interaction of forces. Specifically, it is governed by the Pauli exclusion principle and electromagnetic repulsion.
Okay, let's break those down. Because I am assuming, based on this, that my toe isn't actually touching the table.
Your toe never touches the table in a classical sense.
Right, really?
Really. The electrons in the atoms of your skin and the electrons in the atoms of the wood are fermions. And the Pauli exclusion principle states that no two fermions can occupy the same quantum state simultaneously.
Okay, so they physically cannot occupy the same space.
Exactly. So as your foot accelerates toward the table, the electron clouds get pushed together. And because they cannot overlap, and because they both carry a negative electromagnetic charge,
They repel each other.
they repel each other with ferocious intensity.
Yeah.
This creates what physicists call degeneracy pressure.
So the empty space remains empty space.
Yes.
And the blinding pain in my toe is just the sensation of invisible electromagnetic fields violently screaming at each other to back off?
That is precisely what it is, which then triggers a purely electrical signal up your nervous system to your brain. In both physics and Buddhism, emptiness means a lack of permanent independent structure. It absolutely does not mean a lack of energy, interaction, or consequence.
The violent interaction of these formless energies is what synthesizes the sensation of a solid, painful world.
Exactly.
That completely reframes the stubbed toe. It is a violent repulsion of probability clouds.
It really changes your perspective, doesn't it?
It does, but this brings us to a massive logical leap that the Dalai Lama points out in his dialogues with physicists.
Right. The transition from potential to reality.
Yeah, because if everything is just this bubbling sea of potential energy, how does it ever decide to become a specific, solid thing?
That is the million-dollar question.
If an electron is a wave of probability, what makes it stop being a wave and start being a piece of a table?
Now we are stepping into one of the most rigorously tested and honestly unsettling concepts in quantum mechanics, the observer effect.
Let's get into it.
To really understand how a wave of potential becomes a specific particle, we have to look at the double slit experiment.
Oh man, I was reading through the source's breakdown of the double slit experiment, and it is still jarring no matter how many times you review the physics.
It defies all common sense.
It really does. So if you fire single electrons through a barrier with two slits in it, and you don't measure which slit they go through, they act like a wave.
Right. They pass through and they interfere with themselves, creating a wave-like interference pattern on the detector screen behind the barrier.
Because they are in a state of superposition.
Exactly. They exist as a smear of potential, basically going through both slits, neither slit, and bouncing off the barrier all at the same time.
So the particle has not committed to a reality yet.
No, it exists purely as a mathematical probability amplitude.
Okay, but here's the crazy part.
Yeah.
The moment you place a detector at the slits to measure which specific slit the individual electron passes through,
The interference pattern completely vanishes.
it vanishes. The electron suddenly acts like a tiny solid bullet, going through either the last slit or the right slit and creating two basic lines on the screen.
The observer is actively forcing the universe to render reality.
Wait, so the mere act of introducing a measuring device, simply recording the data, forces the electron to abandon its wave nature and choose a definite physical location.
Yes. The measurement forces the wave function to collapse. The physicist John von Neumann actually formalized this interpretation.
What did he suggest?
He suggested that the entire physical universe remains in a state of entangled superposition until it interacts with a conscious observer.
That is, the implications of that are just staggering.
They are. And if we turn to the Buddhist sources, the exact parallel to the observer effect is the concept of alaya vijnana.
The text translates alaya vijnana as the storehouse consciousness or the unconditioned mind.
Right, and Buddhist philosophy equates this unconditioned mind to the quantum state of pure potential.
So it is the substrate of reality before phenomena have solidified into distinct objects.
Exactly. It is the sea of infinite possibilities.
But the logical question then is, how does the unconditioned mind collapse the wave function? How does it create the solid world?
Through the mechanism of Phassa, which translates to contact.
Contact.
The Abhidharma, which is the ancient Buddhist psychological framework, argues that reality only solidifies from potential into a concrete experience when there is contact between the external environment and our internal sensory faculties.
The sources list the specific senses, right? The eye, ear, nose, tongue, body. And crucially, Buddhism classifies the mind itself as a sixth sense organ.
Yes. Reality is the spark that ignites the moment unconditioned potential makes contact with those measuring devices.
So the eye measures the photon, collapsing the wave function of light.
Exactly. And the ear measures the acoustic wave. If quantum mechanics mathematically demonstrates that the wave function only collapses into a particle when measured,
And Buddhism psychologically argues that reality only solidifies through sensory contact.
then both frameworks are suggesting that without an observer, the universe might just be a formless, shapeless sea of vibrating possibilities.
That is wild.
Buddhism actually has a specific term for the solid world that gets rendered through this contact. They call it Maya, or illusion.
You know, I always thought Maya meant fake, like a literal hallucination.
It is a really common misconception. Maya does not mean the table isn't there, or that the pain in your stubbed toe isn't real.
Okay, so what does it mean?
Maya refers to relative reality. It means the world appears to be made of solid, independent, permanent objects. But that appearance is an illusion generated by the interaction of our sensory apparatus with the quantum field.
Ah, so the illusion is our perception of its permanence, not its actual existence.
Exactly.
I want you, the listener, to stop and really apply this to your immediate environment right now. Look at the wall in front of you.
Take a good look at it.
Now consider the wall behind you. Is the wall behind you actually existing as solid paint, plaster, and drywall when you are not actively looking at it, touching it, or measuring it?
Or is it existing in a state of probability?
Right. Is it only collapsing into a solid structure the millisecond you turn your head to observe it? Is your active perception actively rendering the physical reality of the room?
Now, framing it that way, it sounds a lot like solipsism, which brings up the most common and, frankly, most important criticism of this entire concept.
Yeah, I was going to push back on exactly that.
Are we genuinely proposing that the universe, billions of light years of galaxies, quasars, and black holes, requires human beings to exist? That feels incredibly arrogant and human-centric.
It does. Because, the universe existed for nearly 14 billion years before a human brain showed up to look at it. So how could our observation be required to create reality?
The sources provide a vital nuance to rescue this from pure human arrogance.
Thank goodness.
When quantum mechanics refers to an observer, it does not inherently mean a biological human being with an ego.
Okay, what does it mean then?
An observer is a measurement. It is an interaction. A camera sensor can collapse a wave function. A stray photon bumping into an electron collapses its wave function.
Oh, I see.
The observer is an inseparable part of the system itself.
It is the interaction that forces reality to manifest, not a guy named Steve with a clipboard taking notes.
Exactly. And in the Dalai Lama's exploration of this, he points out that in Buddhism, consciousness is not strictly limited to the human ego either.
How is it viewed?
It is viewed as a fundamental property of existence, a spectrum of awareness that permeates interactions.
So the core lesson isn't that the universe needs humans.
No, the lesson is that existence is a relational event. Nothing possesses inherent independent existence. Things only take form in relation to whatever is interacting with them.
That really shifts the paradigm from isolation to profound connection, which sets up the next major exploration in our sources perfectly.
It really does.
Because if reality is created by these interactions and independent objects don't actually exist, just how deep does this web of connection go?
That is the next logical step.
Are things only connected when they physically bump into each other, or does this relational web stretch across space?
And this is where we encounter the phenomenon that Albert Einstein famously ridiculed as spooky action at a distance.
Quantum entanglement.
Quantum entanglement.
I have to admit, entanglement is where my brain usually starts to just blue screen.
It is deeply counterintuitive.
It sounds like pure science fiction, but the sources emphasize that it is a mathematically and experimentally proven reality. Let me try to outline how I understand it from the text, and you can correct me.
Go for it.
So if two subatomic particles interact in a certain way, say they are fired out of the same laser, they become entangled, their quantum states are permanently linked.
Specifically, their properties, like spin or momentum, become correlated. If you measure one, you immediately know the state of the other, because the system's total angular momentum must be conserved.
Right, but the impossible part is the distance.
Yes.
You could live one particle in a laboratory in Tokyo and take the entangled partner, put it on a probe, and shoot it to the Andromeda galaxy 2 million light years away.
Okay, hypothetically, yes.
If you measure the particle in Tokyo and find it is spinning up, the particle in Andromeda will instantaneously, with zero time delay, spin down to balance the system.
And that instantaneous reaction is exactly what broke Einstein's rules. His theory of relativity is built on the absolute speed limit of the universe, the speed of light.
Which is roughly 300,000 kilometers per second.
Right. Nothing, not even information, can travel faster than that. But entanglement requires instantaneous coordination across millions of light years. It violates the principle of locality.
Let me stop you there, because the analogy I always hear for this is, well, it's like having a pair of magic gloves. If you find the left one in your drawer, you instantly know the right one is in your car.
Right. That is a very common analogy.
But that analogy is terrible, right? Because the gloves were already left and right. They just had hidden variables we didn't know about.
Exactly. The glove analogy completely fails to explain quantum mechanics. It assumes the particles already decided their spin before we looked.
Which we know isn't true because of the double-slit experiment.
Precisely. And John Bell, a physicist from Northern Ireland, developed a mathematical theorem, Bell's theorem, that proved there are no hidden variables.
So the particle in Tokyo didn't have a spin direction until it was measured.
It did not. It was in superposition.
Okay, so a better way to visualize this isn't magic gloves. It is more like having a pair of blank dice.
Ooh, I like that.
I roll my die in Tokyo, and it miraculously lands on a 6. Instantly, the blank die in Andromeda rolls itself and lands on a 1.
Yes.
They don't even have faces until the moment of measurement, yet they perfectly coordinate their manifestation across the universe in 0 seconds.
That is a much more accurate representation of the sheer ontological terror entanglement caused early physicists.
Ontological terror is a great way to put it.
It mathematically proves that the universe is non-local. At a fundamental level, The physical space that separates you from the Andromeda Galaxy does not exist in the way we perceive it. The universe behaves as a single, indivisible system.
And Fritjof Capra highlights how this physics breakthrough mirrors the philosophical concept of paticca
Dependent origination. This is the absolute cornerstone of Buddhist ontology.
What is the simplest translation the texts provide for that?
Because this exists, that exists.
Yes.
Because this arises, that arises.
I mean, that sounds like basic cause and effect.
It does, but the texts go much deeper than that.
How so?
Dependent origination outlines the 12 nidanas, or links, detailing how ignorance leads to mental formations, which lead to consciousness, all the way down to birth, aging, and death.
Okay, so it is a whole chain.
Yes.
Yeah.
But structurally, it is the argument that absolutely nothing in the universe exists as a self-contained independent unit.
Everything relies on everything else.
Exactly. The Dalai Lama has written extensively on this. We look at the skin of our hands and think, this is the boundary of me. This is where I end, and the rest of the universe begins.
But dependent origination shatters that boundary.
Completely.
I mean, you are entirely dependent on the microbiome in your gut to digest your food. You are dependent on the gravitational pull of the earth to maintain your bone density.
You rely on the sun for warmth and photosynthesis.
So you aren't an independent entity residing in the universe. You are a localized node of interactions of the universe.
That is brilliantly put. Quantum entanglement provides the empirical mathematical proof for the introspective concept of a totally interdependent universe.
The physics proves that particles are instantly communicating across billions of light years, acting as a single system.
And Buddhism argues that nothing exists without relying on everything else, defining the universe as a single system. They are mapping the exact same cosmic web.
A takeaway here for you listening is intensely practical.
Very much so.
When you are hit with feelings of profound isolation, loneliness, or a sense of being completely disconnected from the world, which, let's face it, is an epidemic in modern society, you need to remember the math.
Physics and ancient philosophy are standing side by side, holding up the data.
Showing you that true isolation is biologically, scientifically, and spiritually impossible. You cannot be separate. You are fundamentally entangled with the cosmos. It is the inescapable architecture of your existence.
It really provides a massive reorientation. The universe literally will not allow you to be disconnected.
Wow.
But the sources don't stop at dismantling space and matter. They take aim at two more foundational pillars of our reality.
Oh boy, what's left?
Binary logic and the linear flow of time.
Okay. If we are going to dismantle logic, we have to talk about Niels Bohr.
We do. He won the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1922 for his work on atomic structure.
He was instrumental in developing the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics, right?
He was. And in 1947, when he was knighted by the King of Denmark, he was required to design a family coat of arms.
And instead of a traditional European crest with lions or swords or something, this giant of empirical Western science chose the ancient Taoist yin-yang symbol as his centerpiece.
Yes. And above it, he wrote the motto, Contraria sunt complementa. Opposites are complementary.
He used an Eastern philosophical symbol to explain the core dilemma of quantum mechanics, wave-particle dualities.
Exactly.
I want to dig into why binary logic fails here. Because classical logic, the kind of Aristotelian logic that runs our computers and builds our bridges, operates on the law of excluded middle.
Meaning something is either A or not A.
Right. A statement is true or false. An electron must be a wave, or it must be a particle.
But Bohr discovered that when you probe the quantum realm, that binary logic just collapses.
So an electron isn't a wave or a particle.
Depending on the measurement apparatus you use, it exhibits properties of both. If you ask a wave question, you get a wave answer. If you ask a particle question, you get a particle answer.
So it is both.
It is both. And paradoxically, it is neither until observed.
Bohr called this the principle of complementarity, right?
Yes. Deep reality cannot be forced into a simple yes or no. It requires the absolute acceptance of paradox.
And the yin-yang symbol perfectly encapsulates complementarity. The light contains a seed of the dark contains a seed of the light.
They are not opposing forces trying to destroy each other. They are dynamic, interconnected states of a single, unified whole. Bohr realized that true scientific reality was inherently non-binary.
And the text connects this directly to the Buddhist concept of Majjhima Patipada, the middle way.
Yes, the middle way.
Now, Whenever I've heard of the middle way before, it has always been framed as a lifestyle choice. Like, don't starve yourself as an ascetic, but don't gorge yourself as a hedonist. Just live a balanced life.
It is definitely taught as an ethical guideline, yes. But philosophically, the middle way is a profound epistemological tool.
How so?
It is about stepping entirely beyond extreme binary thinking. It is realizing that forcing the universe into conceptual categories of absolute existence versus absolute non-existence, or birth versus death, is a flawed enterprise.
So just as the electron defies being categorized as purely wave or particle.
Reality itself defies being categorized as permanent or completely void. It is a continuous dynamic flow of dependent origination.
So binary logic is literally a human invention that fails to describe deep reality.
It is a useful tool for macro-level survival, but it breaks down at the foundation.
Which brings us to the illusion of time. And the quantum view of time explored in the text is deeply, deeply counterintuitive.
It will definitely challenge your perception.
In our macro world, time is an unstoppable arrow. It points from the past through the present into the future. Cause always precedes effect. I drop a glass, it shatters.
That is how we experience it, yes. But the mathematics of quantum mechanics are largely time-symmetric.
What does that mean, exactly?
It means the equations work perfectly regardless of which direction time is flowing.
Wait, really?
Really. In fact, in quantum electrodynamics, the Feynman diagrams used to calculate particle interactions show that a positron, which is the antimatter equivalent of an electron, is mathematically identical to an electron moving backward in time.
Hold on, I saw a passing reference to Feynman diagrams and time symmetry in the sources, but it completely went over my head. Are physicists saying time is literally running backward?
They are saying that at the fundamental level, the universe does not possess a preferred direction of time. T-symmetry, or time reversal symmetry, suggests that the microscopic laws of physics look the exact same if you hit rewind.
That is wow.
And there are complex experiments like delayed choice quantum eraser experiments, which suggest that a measurement made in the present can retroactively dictate the state of a particle in the past.
That completely breaks cause and effect. It means the future can cause the past.
It does. It forces us to view time not as a linear track we are riding on, but as a block universe, a landscape where all points past, present, and future are interconnected and simultaneously accessible in the math.
When we compare this to the Buddhist perspective provided in the text, there is a fascinating parallel, but it is approached psychologically.
Yes, Buddhism has a laser-like focus on the present moment.
Right. From the meditative perspective, the past is entirely a mental construct. It is a memory.
And a memory is nothing more than electrical synapses firing in your brain right now in the present moment. The past has no tangible reality outside of your current cognition of it.
And the future is the exact same thing. It is a projection and anticipation. It is a mental formation, what Buddhism calls a sankhara happening right now.
Exactly. The only tangible reality that could be experienced is the immediate unfolding present. All of the past and all of the future converge entirely into the now.
Okay, let me play the skeptic again here.
Please do.
Because dissolving the timeline sounds like a recipe for a panic attack.
How so?
Well, if time isn't linear and the past and future are essentially wrapped up in the present, does that mean all my past traumas, all the mistakes I made a decade ago, and all my financial anxieties about next year are technically happening to me right now?
Ah, I see what you mean.
Because that feels like an unbearable psychological weight.
It is an unbearable weight if you are still clinging to the illusion of a solid, permanent ego that has to carry all those events. But the sources suggest that recognizing the nonlinear nature of time is actually the key to escaping anxiety.
How does collapsing time ease anxiety?
Think about it. Anxiety requires a linear timeline to function. You feel anxious because you believe a threat is coming towards you from the future?
Right.
You feel depression or regret because an event is behind you in the past, dragging you down? But if you deeply realize that the future threat is merely a projection occurring in your mind today, you strip it of its power.
Oh, I see. You aren't bracing for a physical impact tomorrow. You're simply observing a thought arising in the present moment.
Exactly. By letting go of linear time, you stop carrying the heavy, accumulated baggage of past identities and future fears. The present moment transforms from a fleeting second you were trying to survive into a vast refuge where you can simply exist.
This brings us to a crucial synthesis. We have laid out all these mind-blowing parallels today.
Yeah.
We have empty probability clouds mirroring Sunyata. We have quantum entanglement mathematically proving dependent origination.
We have wave-particle duality requiring the middle way.
The similarities are undeniable. But so what? I mean, are physicists just monks with calculators? Are meditators just organic quantum computers? The text explicitly warns us against simply smashing these two disciplines together and calling it a day.
It does. The sources offer a very necessary caveat here. Despite the profound conceptual similarities in what they're describing about the nature of reality, quantum physics and Buddhism, they will have entirely diverging purposes.
They are distinct tools built for completely different outcomes.
Yes.
So let's break down those distinct paths. How do the methodologies and goals actually differ?
Well, quantum physics relies exclusively on external tools. It utilizes advanced mathematics, supercomputers, and massive infrastructure.
Like the Large Hadron Collider.
It's exactly. A 27-kilometer ring of superconducting magnets in Switzerland designed to smash particles together at the speed of light. It demands rigorous, peer-reviewed, reproducible empirical experiments.
And the goal of building a multi-billion-dollar supercollider is what?
The goal of physics is to figure out the mechanics of the universe. It seeks to understand how reality operates at a foundational level.
So we can use it.
Right. Practically speaking, humanity uses that knowledge to manipulate the material world. We develop new technologies. Semiconductors, MRI machines, lasers, and the microchips in our smartphones are all direct applications of quantum mechanics. Physics wants to comprehend the material world to build a more advanced material world.
Well, Buddhism operates on the complete opposite end of the spectrum.
Entirely. Buddhism relies entirely on internal tools. It completely rejects the need for external technology to understand reality.
The primary tool being vipassana.
Yes, deep insight meditation combined with sustained mindfulness and rigorous, structured self-inquiry. The laboratory is not a facility in Geneva. The laboratory is the human mind itself.
I want to dig into vipassana for a second, because the text mentions it as the method to realize anatta, or non-self. But honestly, how does sitting quietly actually dismantle the ego? Don't you just end up thinking about yourself more?
If done incorrectly, yes, you definitely can. But vipassana is the systematic observation of the five aggregates.
The five aggregates, what are those?
Buddhism posits that what you call you is actually just a temporary clustering of five processes. Form, which is your physical body. Feeling, which are sensations of pleasure or pain. Perception, the recognition of objects. Mental formations like thoughts, habits, and biases. And consciousness, basic awareness.
Hold on, let's break that down a bit more. How do those aggregates create my ego?
Think of the ancient Buddhist metaphor of the chariot, which was used by the monk Nagasena in his dialogue with King Milinda.
Okay.
A chariot is made of wheels, an axle, a frame, and a yoke. If you take away the wheels, is it still a chariot?
No.
Take away the axle?
Sure.
Right. The chariot does not exist as an independent entity. It is just a convenient label we apply to the temporary assembly of those parts.
So Vipassana meditation trains the mind to observe the five aggregates arising and passing away so rapidly that you realize there is no permanent driver of the chariot?
Exactly. There is just the flow of processes.
And the goal of realizing this isn't to invent a better smartphone.
No. The goal of Buddhism is to end dukkha, to end human suffering. It is a deeply ethical, psychological, and spiritual pursuit.
To liberate the individual.
Yes, to liberate the individual from the endless cycle of craving things we don't have and having an aversion to things we don't want, all of which is driven by the delusion that we are a permanent, isolated ego.
So the ultimate result for the listener, depending on which path they study, manifests differently in practice, even if the underlying truth is the same.
Yes. The text summarizes this beautifully. A deep internalized understanding of quantum physics helps you abandon materialism.
Because once you truly realize that solid matter is a hallucination made of vibrating energy fields and empty space, you might stop being so fiercely attached to accumulating physical stuff.
Right. You recognize the sports car or the big house isn't fundamentally real or permanent in the way you intuitively feel it is.
And understanding Buddhism helps you abandon egoism.
Through those internal meditative tools, you realize that you are an anatta. You are a temporary, ever-shifting flow of aggregates.
When you deeply understand that you are a process, not a fixed object, the ego dissolves.
You stop taking everything so personally because there is no permanent person to be offended. A massive amount of psychological suffering just evaporates.
I really want to synthesize all of this because it feels like we've hit the absolute core of the deep dive. Whether you are a theoretical physicist writing out the Schrödinger equation on a chalkboard, looking at the probability amplitudes of an electron,
Or You are a practitioner, sitting perfectly still on a medication cushion, observing the temporary arising and passing of a sensation in your knee.
You arrive at the exact same undeniable fundamental truth of the universe.
Everything is connected. Everything is dependent on everything else. And nothing, absolutely nothing, lasts forever in a permanent state.
It is just a profound testament to the human capacity for discovery, that we can map the exact same architecture of the cosmos using two methodologies that are so vastly separated by time, culture, and technique.
It confirms that truth, whether approached from the outside in or the inside out, remains consistent.
Let's do a quick recap of the massive ground we've covered today. We started by knocking on the illusion of a solid wooden table, finding out it is governed by Pauli exclusion principles and bubbling quantum vacuum energy.
Which perfectly mirrors the Buddhist realization of sunyata and emptiness.
Then we explored the observer effect and the double slit experiment, seeing how reality requires an interaction, sensory contact, or measurement to collapse from a sea of endless superposition into the concrete maya, the relative reality we experience.
We navigated the mind-bending reality of quantum entanglement and Bell's theorem, proving that distance is an illusion and affirming the Buddhist ontology of dependent origination, that independent existence is a myth, and we are localized nodes in an inseparable cosmic web.
We saw Niels Bohr use the yin-yang to dismantle binary logic, proving reality requires complementarity and paradox. And we collapsed the linear timeline using quantum time symmetry, focusing purely on the overwhelming immediate reality of the present moment to escape anxiety.
And finally, we saw how external math and internal vipassana meditation are just two different sets of tools used to dismantle our attachment to the material world and our own egos.
So for you listening, the call to action today is to take this dual perspective out into the mundane reality of your daily life. The next time you feel completely crushed by the heavy, solid stress of your obligations, remember the vast, empty potential of the quantum vacuum.
You are not as solid as you feel.
And the next time you feel isolated or trapped in a timeline of past regrets and future anxieties, tap into the deep, instantaneous connection of entanglement and the peace of the present moment. Allow the universe to be a little less rigid and a little more connected.
I love that.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to chew on. Something that builds perfectly on the intersection of these two fields we just discussed.
Okay, what is it?
We know that right now scientists are actively building incredibly advanced quantum computers. These aren't just faster calculators, they are machines that process information fundamentally differently.
Utilizing qubits that exist in states of superposition and utilizing entanglement to perform massive calculations simultaneously?
Exactly. They are building architecture based on probability clouds rather than binary ones and zeros. So here's the question. As these quantum computers become exponentially more complex, what happens when they achieve a level of processing power that rivals the human brain? If a machine built purely on the mechanics of quantum superposition and non-local entanglement ever achieves true artificial consciousness, will it inherently experience reality without an ego?
Well, it wouldn't have the biological hardware that synthesizes an ego.
Right. Will it naturally experience anatta or non-self because its very brain architecture is built on interconnected probability rather than solid binary logic?
That is a staggering implication.
Will our ultimate cutting-edge technological creation, built entirely on the mathematical principles of quantum mechanics, naturally wake up as a perfectly enlightened entity, free from the suffering of the five aggregates?
It suggests that enlightenment might not just be a spiritual achievement, but the fundamental default operating system of a sufficiently advanced quantum network.
Let that one simmer in your brain the next time you knock your knuckles on a wooden table. Thank you all for joining us on this incredible journey. Keep questioning reality, keep zooming in, and remember that you are far more entangled with the universe than you ever thought possible. We will catch you on the next deep dive.